You're listening to the AfterBuzz TV network, now the largest new media platform on the web, and your number one source for after-show entertainment.
Very good, Keith Johnson.
From the AfterBuzz Studios in Los Angeles, California, presented by Maria Menounos and streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies.
This is AfterBuzz TV's House of Cards After Show.
We'll break down tonight's episode and get you all the latest news and gossip. And now, another post-game wrap-up show for your favorite TV show.
It's AfterBuzz TV's House of Cards After Show.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, AfterBuzzers. Welcome to Netflix original series House of Cards, episode 6, entitled Chapter 19. I'm your host, Thaddeus Massey, and joining me today is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Sofia, Stanley.
Hey, guys. It's Emma Kay.
Yes, so we're diving right into this episode. There was a lot going on. There was a lot of sandbox playing, as I like to call it, with Frank and Raymond Tusk, like two kids stealing each other's toys, their toy trucks, and jumping on each other's sandcastles, going on like behind each other's backs. Like, these guys are like straight little kids, but like the upper 1% jockeying for power and position. We see Tusk, and now he's like asking Frank for assistance with the president, which is really funny because I guess he feels like, okay, I got hung up on. What was that, last episode? Mm-hmm. He got hung up on by the president, and he said that's the first time I ever got hung up on in 20 years, me being friends with this guy. Now he's really doesn't know where to land. And as we see throughout the episode, it's like a little kid lashing out. So now he's starting to exact whatever little power that he has. But starting off the episode, he's reaching out to Frank, trying to gain some favor because he doesn't know where to go at this point.
Do you guys ever wonder when the fighting between these two is going to end? I just feel like, since last season, all we've seen is these two people fighting, and they haven't really been addressing any political topics, bills, aside from the school bill, which was in season 1. I haven't seen anything that the White House should be taking care of. We're seeing more of their personalities and their personal problems against one another than real drama and real issues that are going on in the White House.
Go ahead, Sofia. No, go ahead, Sofia.
I agree with you 100%, Emma, but I think that actually shows exactly who they are. I think that they're both in the position that they are purely for their self-interest. I think that neither of them went into, let's say, Frank with politics to serve the greater good, and Raymond, isn't a businessman to serve the greater good. He's a businessman to serve himself. And I think that it's similar, and kind of going back to the sandbox analogy, I wonder the same thing of when they're going to stop fighting. However, I also think it's possible that, and I know everyone's going to think I'm crazy, it's possible that they'll actually become friends. Because haven't you guys ever had like someone at school who, from the minute you saw them, you just didn't like them, right? And the reason you didn't like them is because they're exactly like you, right? And something eventually happens where all of a sudden you realize, and in some weird way, they're the only person potentially you could respect.
Right.
Because Frank always makes this analogy between power and money. Power and money. Whatever you keep kind of having disdain for, expressing disdain for, there's a part of you that envies it just a little bit.
Right.
So I think that Frank envies money and Raymond envies power.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I think that in a weird way, that when the fighting stops, they actually may join forces in some future world.
They may, but what's really funny is that they were supposed to have been joining forces from the beginning, but Frank never had any intention of joining forces. It was all self-serving interest to begin with, just so he can get in the White House as the VP. Now you have Raymond realizing that Frank never was planning on fulfilling this alliance. This alliance he never intended on following through with any obligations of an alliance.
No, I completely agree.
So now Raymond feels like, okay, this guy has really pulled the wool over my eyes.
Well, because Raymond thinks that he put him in, as the vice president, but Frank knows that they had no other choice. They had no other candidates.
Right.
And the way he positioned himself and the whole situation, he knew he was going to get it. So he doesn't respect Tusk because he didn't make anything happen.
Right. It's kind of like
But
you making a choice when you really, well, that's all the choices that you really
I mean,
have.
he
What else are you gonna do?
prevented him.
said.
Right.
He prevented him from getting Secretary of not Secretary
of State.
It was
Secretary of
yeah.
State, but he didn't really do anything to get him vice presidency. So he is pissed off about before, but
Right.
he's not grateful for the present.
Well, see, this is the funny thing is with Frank, and I've said this time and time again, it's not just that he's not grateful, it's that, like, he is a child and he holds, like, an unnatural grudge.
Right.
So if you think about it, their reasoning of keeping him in the house was a sound decision, right?
Yes.
Because at the end of the day, look how it turned out, right? Catherine Durant, who was much better suited
Yes.
to be Secretary of State than Frank, right?
Yes.
Allowing her to be Secretary of State and him staying in the house then allowed him to figure out a better plan, which then ended up him being VP without even having to be voted in. Like,
Yeah.
that, if he really stopped and thought about it, he should take a quick second to be like, oh, wait, this is really cool. As well as the fact that when he was denied Secretary of State, they, i.e. Raymond, hadn't really seen him. All he
Right.
thought he was a majority whip.
Right.
At the time that they basically like gave him the go-ahead to be VP, Raymond had started to see him. Because in order for Frank to come to his house, for him to have the exchange, for Remy to basically have to switch sides and bring Raymond to Freddie's, basically, and he had offered something to Frank, and Frank was like, oh, I don't do blank checks. Like, oh,
Right.
you think you control me?
Right.
No. And basically, he completely renegotiated the terms and was like, oh, we'll be partners. Think about it.
Right.
To be partners with Raymond Tusk, if Raymond thought about it, Raymond should have been like, okay, maybe I need to keep an eye on this guy.
Right.
And the funny thing is, he really isn't.
Right.
Like, he keeps losing, and I need to make the analogy, but he keeps dropping the ball with Frank.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And I think that that's why, and I'm a dork, so I wrote it down if I have a moment to do the quote, but I think that's why.
Go ahead.
That's why I think at Freddie's, Frank really basically had to say to him, like, oh, you must think that I'm stupid because, yeah, we sat down as partners for our mutual benefit, but I realize this is no longer of benefit to me. And he goes, I benefit in no way from this partnership. We both respect self-interest above all else. Our versions of that no longer align. But what I do know is you're going to call Linda and accept the subsidies. You may have all the money, Raymond, but I have all the men with guns.
Right. And then he gives him the burnout phone and says it's going to go down straight to Linda, which was really funny. Like, yeah, go ahead and do it. You're going to accept these subsidies. Oh, and the ball's in your court. And then dumps the ball to him after the whole shenanigans at Camden Yards, which was really, really, really funny. But the thing I like about this, even though you're saying, Emma mentioned about not, dealing with bills and whatnot, which is, exact law, bills or whatever, that's definite law. But all the politics behind it, this writing is really specifically how things go. And everything that happens in these people's personal lives, these pissing contests, these ego challenges, is really all the things that affect how things are handled and operated in that society, in which affects the rest of us. Instead of just doing what they're supposed to do for the betterment of us all, they're in self-serving interests, whereas they're supposed to be serving the American people.
Which is, I think, was such a great example that they provided, that there was a blackout. Like,
Yes.
in their feuding, we literally, in the midst of
Part of the
a heat
pissing
wave,
contest.
right,
Right.
where it's like over 90 degrees, and I don't know if anyone's ever been to the District of Columbia or the DMV area. Summer, I think humidity is at like 80%. Like, DC was built on a swamp.
Right.
So just imagine what that must feel like, and it's 90 plus degrees.
In
and
the
there's
South
no,
as well.
Do you know what I mean? And there's
Yeah.
no air conditioning.
Yeah.
And they're basically fighting, like you said, in the sandbox,
Right.
and we're suffering because now people literally cannot either afford the air conditioning or then power went out.
Right. I wonder if the writers, and part of the point of the show is to actually just not only enjoy and be entertained, but for the sake of entertainment, but actually to educate us.
I totally think so.
And it's so they hit it's so incredibly clever, the writing, in how they are educating us but entertaining us at the same time. They're hitting the nail on the head but not really hitting the nail on the head. It's in such a way that it'll encourage anybody who's a thinking, living, breathing, red-blooded American to get up and say, I need to do more and become more active in my local government, in my regional government, in the federal government, how laws are, because really these people that we elect to serve us are supposed to be representing us, when, just like Frank said, they're self-serving and they're there to represent themselves. And what's really funny is, even though Raymond Tusk is a private citizen, he's in the private sector, he's his own businessman, He's a billionaire, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But he's made his money by serving the public.
Good point.
So I think they did that on purpose because he actually has a corporation, has made all his money off of providing a service to the masses. It's not like...
And not just a service, a necessary service,
yes,
not a luxury.
Yes, it's like a utility.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they did that on purpose as far as giving him that kind of, being that kind of businessman, just to show that, okay, well, you're a private businessman, but you serve the interests of the people too. Just because you're profiting from it doesn't mean that you still don't serve the benefit of everybody.
And it shows how much influence he has on the White House as well. Being a private citizen and private business owner, he has more influence in the White House than you would assume over the vice president, which is what they're fighting over.
Right. And this influence, even though he's losing his grip or his power, his influence is there. Just because he is who he is, he's not like a non-factor. He's a factor, definitely. And this is why this jockeying is going on.
So do you think that the president did the right thing in calling him during the energy crisis?
You know what? I was thinking about that. It actually showed some weakness.
But I think it was instinct. He's used to calling. You have to remember that Frank wasn't always there. Tusk was the one that he would call for help, for anything, for advice that he needed. So I think he was acting out of instinct and routine, versus him just wanting to go to Tusk and find out what's going on.
Well,
and once Frank brings it up,
no,
and says,
Frank was the one also that said, this is Tusk. He's acting out because blah, blah, blah. He says, you don't think he would do that, because of you don't think he would do that as lashing out, like to retaliate or whatever, do you? He said, well, I mean, he said he mentioned FERC to him. Mm-hmm. So basically that was putting Tusk in a rock and a hard place. That, look, if you don't agree with these subsidies, we're going to investigate and you're going to be brought up. FERC is like it's like a board.
Price fixing, I think.
It has, it has something to do with him manipulating the market for his own beneficial purposes, or his own profit gaining interests, which is actually a detriment to the masses because he has a public service company. So
right. However, and kind of going back to your early point of whether or not the writers are kind of deliberately trying to highlight certain things in normal society that we may or may not be aware of.
Right.
I think it's also, I personally felt that Raymond's response was perfect. He was like, no, it's a free market society, i.e. it's supply and demand. So the supply of what I have goes up because you guys have created a crisis. It's only in my economic best interest, in the interest of capitalism, to raise the price.
Right.
So how is that bad? That's basically was Raymond's response.
And then what is Frank's response to that is, well, we have to go in there and seize the plants. And Linda was like, that was in a time of war. And he was like, no, that was in a time of emergency. And this is an emergency. So the guy with the guns, he is reasserting that the guy with the guns is going to beat the guy with the money. Because you can have all the money in the world, but if a guy comes to you, it comes and breaks in your house with a bazooka and some handguns and whatever, your bank account's not going to help you unless you've hired those guns as well. But Tusk doesn't have the power of an army behind him. And now you're getting to the point where there's nothing he can do. I mean, if the government decides to impose the seizure of the plants, and he's saying, oh, it's safety. He's sitting there eating his fruit in the laptop in the dark room. It was diabolical. It was very ominous, wasn't it? It was like, oh, wow, really? He was sitting there like, yeah, it's safety regulations. I can't. And he's like, I'm going to have to take off two of my plants or three of my plants offline. Georgia and Tennessee, he's going to have to take them off. And you're like, really, dude? Like, really? You don't know how obvious this seems right now? Like, but
the
irony is, go ahead, Emma.
I was going to say, it is so obvious, and it surprises me how the president could be so naive and not realizing what is going on. I think he's an A personality who can't even control his own house, yet I don't know how he got elected to be in the White House.
Because he's popular.
And all he's trying to do is keep his head above water.
Okay, well, here's the thing. This is why they're making the president, they're giving the image that the president.
You think he was popular, or you think Tusk made him popular?
He may have, because of.
I don't think if people knew the real, President Walker, I don't think they would have elected him.
And you know what's funny about that? I actually disagree. And the reason being,
with which part?
With if they knew the real Walker, they wouldn't have voted for him.
No, I think the reason the real Walker got to presidency is because he is who he is.
Right.
The thing about him, the reason why he's losing in the White House is because everything is so sinister and shady, and he's not like that. He's an above board guy. This is what appealed to the American people, which is why he got voted in. The thing about him not being seeming or looking naive is because all this stuff that's been going on behind the scenes, the back channeling and them going behind his back, they are doing all this manipulation to manipulate him, to manipulate their influence with him. He's told them this, and this, to do this and to do that. We've seen at least 3 or 4 occasions.
Okay,
we've seen 3 or 4 occasions where they specifically disobeyed what he told them to do.
And that's fine, but that's in your own house. Imagine what goes on around the world. So you're telling me that if he's dealing with another country, he's going to be that naive? Because you don't know what back channeling they're doing. So you always have to be at least 5-6 steps ahead of whoever it is, especially in your own house. Now, if you can't control your kids, how do you go out and teach the rest of the world what to do?
Now here's a good point that you're mentioning, because that goes what that proposes is that you would think that Tusk would have loyalty to America when he's doing this business with China, but it's really not China. It's somebody who happens to be Chinese, who's just a billionaire. That's a Chinese citizen, just like he just happens to be an American citizen. It's really not about Fang having loyalty to China. It's not about Tusk having loyalty to America. It's about 2 self-serving billionaires who are looking to make a crap load of more money. And that's really all it's about. It's about the investors that Fang represents. He represents a group of investors, and he says our business interests lie with this and with that. That's all about business. It's not about government. And the thing about it is they're only showing the business side. But Fang is like the Tusk of China. So he's been led up on corruption charges twice, which he didn't get convicted. It's like if Raymond, it's just like if Tusk had to go see FERC or had a Senate hearing committee or something like. It's the same type of thing. He's just a powerful man, but they're not actually in government. They just have their hands dipped in the government and with politicians and whatnot.
And I feel your frustration, Emma, and I think Thaddeus brought this up last episode. It really has to do with the fact of being naive to government. And I think that Frank, in so many ways, and Raymond to a certain extent, really symbolizes what I consider to be like the old school, right? And recently, and I think primarily because of not only news but entertainment, and arguably because the two have now blended and we have somewhat more transparency. I mean, hello, like the president and the first lady, like they tweet. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a certain level of transparency where we didn't have before, that now we're quote unquote going to the new school where we do want more transparency. We want less quote unquote back channeling and corruption and, you rub my, you pat my back, I pat yours. And I think the problem is in the transition, there's going to be friction. Right? And I think the problem is the president cannot be kind of, quote unquote, run a clean house per se, unless every single person in his house is clean. So can you really take all of the old players from a corrupt, quote unquote, dynasty and all of a sudden assume because you're clean that all of a sudden they're going to be clean?
Right.
No, not really. However, and I'm going to talk out of the complete opposite side of my mouth, how would he know that? Do you know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, the world still goes around on its axis, right? Mm-hmm. For the most part, as Americans, we have been privy to an extremely good run.
Right.
Think about it. For what? We're about 200 years old? Most of our major occurrences that we've only probably had one on-soil occurrence. Right. Other than that, you know what I mean? Other than the revolution, we're not going to count that. But once we've, you know what I mean, is the Civil War. Yeah. Other than that, we've had, you know what I mean, 2 attacks, Pearl Harbor and arguably 9/11. In a 200-year history. We have, had great economic strength. until recently, which was a blip, but now technically we're back up. And even within the blip, it's not like we were like, we didn't have to ration for food. We didn't have to ration gas like in the Depression.
Right.
So if you think about it, the president's coming in and thinking to himself, okay, this is a great running thing. I'm going to put my little stamp on it. I'm going to be a little bit more transparent. I'm going to, be a little bit better than the next guy, and we're going to be fine.
Well, what's becoming transparent is that Frank is chasing the White House to be the top dog. I wonder if Maria would chase it like that.
That's a really good question. Let's go to commercial break.
Tuesdays on Oxygen.
I'm Maria Menounos, and my life can get a little crazy. I host Extra. I'm an actor, producer, dancer, wrestler, and a lot of other things. I live with Kevin, my boyfriend of 15 years. Do you really love me?
I would say that I'm in serious like.
And my parents. Yep, I just said I live with my parents.
You drive me crazy.
You drive me crazy. My parents want us to get married.
You both love each other. Get married.
Kevin and I don't. I am going to get married when I want to get married. I think I want kids. Kevin definitely doesn't want them now.
This is being pushed on to us.
And of course, my parents wanted them yesterday.
This year, you gotta have it.
And I have a house full of people counting on me financially. If I take my eye off the ball, everything can fall apart.
It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or wants us to do. It's what we want to do.
Everyone thinks that they know what's best for me, but I'm really the only one. I have got to figure things out.
Chasing Maria Menounos is so new. Every Tuesday at 10, 9 Central, starting March 18, only on Oxygen.
Yeah, you guys need to check that out. That sounds so. I want to watch the episode right now. Okay, Kat. Right.
I'm in serious like.
Kevin and Maria. Maria and Kevin. That has got to be a juicy show on Oxygen. I can't wait to actually catch the first episode of that. Okay. So.
I hope she goes all clear on him.
I know, right? She probably will. Knowing her, she's going to let him have it. Funny. That was a great trailer, actually. That was really funny. Okay, so let's talk about. There's so much going on. Let's talk about Stamper real quick. I put Stamper stumped. That was my note for Stamper, because Stamper is stumped with this scenario. Okay. He got stuck with not knowing how to handle this situation.
The whole Hammersmith.
Yeah, the Hammersmith, because that was a factor. Do you think that Frank is being a little? The tone, he knows how Frank thinks. And even though Frank didn't come down on him and said, how could you not have this under control? Because, Stamper is his fixer and fixes everything. He's not God. He's not all powerful. Stamper can only do so much. And Hammersmith is not something that he could possibly anticipate.
That's Frank being a little kid. When he doesn't get his way and what he wants, he just stands in the middle of the room and starts stomping his feet and crying like a little kid.
Right.
Even though he's not, doing that. But I wanted to read a quote real quickly from that episode when him and Stamper are standing in front of the painting, and he tells Stamper, "We need to invite a full frontal attack and then hold the line."
Right.
So and then tells him to invite Hammersmith to have the meeting to discuss.
Yeah, intimidate him with formality is what he said, which. Yeah, Sofia?
No, you
finish. Yeah, Frank said intimidate with formality, which means bring him in, have him be influenced and intimidated by the power of his environment and meeting with the vice president. Have him come in, and we're going to follow up on this investigation and have it just be overwhelming. It's because it's in the midst of Hammersmith's investigation. Hammersmith hasn't come to his conclusions yet. He's in the midst of his investigation based on the information that he's already skeptical about based on what Lucas and Janine have told him and what he's discovered. And Frank hasn't come in to meet regarding this. Now, my question is, and you guys probably thought about this too, at least some of you that are really smart like me probably thought about this. And you guys, you can go ahead and make comments or whatever. But did you guys think that this was premature? I was like, isn't that kind of saying you kind of had some shade to do with this situation by having Hammersmith come in? And at this point, why would you need to even validate any of these accusations or anything that he's saying? And how does he even know about Hammersmith's involvement? Is it because is it because it is cyber terrorism and it has something to do with the vice president that it's part of security protocol?
That's actually the question I asked myself. Like, I was actually confused. Like, I didn't know how they were going to explain to Hammersmith that he was writing this article. Like, that confused me.
And the vice president wants to meet with you? Like, I would be like,
no,
really?
As well as the fact that not only did I think it was premature. Actually, no, let me take that back. I actually didn't think it was premature. Like, once, if someone can answer for me how the connection was made that they knew about the article, it wasn't premature. What I actually didn't agree with or was confused about is it seemed like irrational. Like, so Hammersmith had previously been the editor of
the Washington
Herald, right? Which is basically the Washington Post. So arguably one of the top 3 newspapers in the United States of America.
Yes.
So I'm going to be intimidated by the vice president? Like, the whole aspect of media is not to be intimidated, number one. And he's not a newbie.
And Hammersmith's not the guy that would be intimidated.
Right? As well as the fact that, not to be flip or condescending, like, you're a pretend vice president. Like, you're involved, but like, I didn't vote for you.
Right.
You did just happen to, the other guy decided he was going to run for governor, and they slid you in, no public ceremony, and now you happen to be a vice president. 2 seconds ago, you were the majority whip. And I don't mean that to sound crass, but the majority whip, that kind of feels more like a normal person, right? There's not the same level of pomp and circumstance as a quote unquote vice president and or a president.
Right.
So I felt that kind of confused me. And then he didn't answer any of the questions, and I couldn't decide if Hammersmith was actually like had a poker face on. But when he asked him, so did you kill Russo? Frank didn't answer.
He didn't answer either question.
If you killed Zoe, and he didn't answer.
Yeah.
To me, and I could be wrong, but I watch way too much like Snapped and 48 Hours and all those shows, right? But there's a certain human like instinct. If someone asks you if you did something, especially when you didn't do it and it's bad, you go, no, are you kidding me? I was about to curse.
Effing kidding me.
Do you know what I mean? But are you kidding me? Like, that would be your natural reaction. You only normally pause or think or have a long answer when you're thinking. And usually when you're thinking, it's because you're lying.
Right.
Right? Because no one has to ask you that.
Because it's not natural.
It's not natural. So did you kill someone? No. Have you ever killed somebody? No. If they go, oh, did you kill Russo? And you killed Russo, you're trying to stall.
Let me make sure I don't say the wrong thing
the wrong way. And he should have known that. So again, I can't decide if Hammersmith had a poker face.
Well, Hammersmith, for him to even ask those questions in the manner in which he asked, it shows that, dude, I'm not tripping about you being the vice president. I think he really did not care that, Frank, you're the vice president. Great. If I was that intimidated by this, I would expect to have this kind of confrontation. Like you said, he's not a newbie. He's been in this business for a long time. And when you got these people that are all intertwined, interdependent on the system, he doesn't. He's just another dude. He could be the president. And if you felt like the dude was shady and he had an opportunity to ask him something, you're like, yo, did you kill such and such? Yeah. Did you kill such and such?
Well, media was created to be the watchdog, to, give the people information on what they didn't know and what they didn't see was really going on.
Right.
So, and talking about old school and new school, that's what, he is. Hammersmith, he's old school, which he feels like being more of the watchdog, the watch guard. And Zoe was just, trying to be the popular kid who got, the stories out and, put her name on it. They had two completely different perspectives on journalism. Yet, I think it was premature of Frank to invite him in. Although I think he was doing it and he didn't answer on purpose to show Hammersmith what he was capable of doing. So, okay, go ahead and publish a story or try to do it.
That was a subtext.
If you
definitely.
If you're going to ask me that question and I'm not answering it, imagine what would happen to you if you think I'm guilty of it. But then at the same time, I'm thinking, okay, well, why would you want to have something tied to you? If this is a waste of your time, as you claimed in the meeting, you're going to meet with Duran and you're like, I don't have time for this, we're done over here, but yet you're entertaining it. So it was like, I don't know, it was like I got two different feelings from that.
Well, here's the thing. When you're playing a game and certain things happen, you have to respond and deal with it in order to, pick it up and keep going in order for you to succeed and win the game. You can't, quote unquote, if you shoot a jump shot, you can't continue the game thinking about the shot that you missed. You have to move forward in order to think about winning that game.
And I think,
but that doesn't mean that the people who are watching the game aren't going to remember or see things that didn't lead up to the missed shot. Even if you win the game, even if you ultimately win that game, there could be a pivotal shot that you missed that people could be like, well, remember he did this, he did that, and that led up to him missing that shot with such and such seconds left. So there's things that you're not going to be able to cover up. So when you get questions about those things, now it's like, okay, but where is the trail? I need to make sure that the trail is covered. I need to make sure that Stamper is covering my tracks. I have to cover Stamper's tracks. He has to make sure that everything is all the bases are being covered. And when it's something so close to you, there are nuances. There are nuances that are called tails. And those tails are the littlest things that can give you away.
So exactly to your point. So do you think that if the FBI agents basically hadn't gotten Janine to turn, that Hammersmith would have written a different article? Do you think that Janine was the pivotal change? Because to me, those two things are tells. Because what both of you are saying is that either all of us, I'm saying that's not how you would respond.
Right.
You're saying it was a veiled threat.
Yes.
Right. And you're saying it was a missed shot because he didn't anticipate that Hammersmith was going to come and ask him that question.
Right.
Those are three good reasons why maybe there's some validity to the story. And if Janine hadn't turned, do we think that Hammersmith would have written a different article?
Yes, and I'm saying I think he did it on purpose to invite a full attack and then hold the line. So he invited the attack on them, but it kind of like accelerated the process of Lucas taking the plea, and it accelerated the process of Hammersmith going to Janine to get the story going before he takes the plea. But I think Frank did it on purpose because they know obviously everything that's going on inside the cell, what Lucas is doing, and they're getting all that information. So, and they know that Hammersmith is trying to call Janine, which is why they invited him to the office.
Right.
So they did it to speed up the process and to get him to Janine for the FBI to follow the trail to get Lucas to take the plea.
Got it, Emma. Emma's on point with that one.
Yeah.
It's very. Yeah, and you're right, because that would actually help them sweep the whole situation under the rug in a more expeditious fashion. I mean, if you think about it,
because then the FBI wouldn't have any reason to, get Janine into. I mean, they would, but it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be a serious topic.
Right. What's crazy about it is the actions that are all being taken scream, this MF is guilty. This dude, Frank Underwood, is guilty of these things because they're putting too much on it. If there's nothing there, then there's nothing to lead back to. So you don't have to put that much federal resources into squashing something that has no validity. Think about it. They're sending the FBI to Janine's house. Janine is already bounced. She's probably the smartest one on the whole episode. I mean, the smartest one. I would imagine what Janine would be like if she was a public office, if she was a representative, a congresswoman or something like that. She'd be something to really deal with. But she's really smart. She saw what was going on. Yeah. She told Lucas from jump, when he started to go through this investigation, it was like, oh no, it's over. This is a done deal. This is over our heads. Like, look at everything that's going on. But Lucas... See what happens, guys, with the women, and
Can I say something?
Exactly.
Learn from the Lucas.
Learn from the women.
Well, you see what happened with Lucas.
No, and actually, can I say something?
What's happening to Lucas?
No, but there's only 50% of this has to do with Zoe. This has everything to do with Lucas. Lucas now is on
obsession. He's obsessed with this.
And he's obsessed with Frank. He's obsessed with the fact that Frank got away with it. It has less to do with the fact that he lost his girlfriend, and more to do with the fact that this person's getting away with it. And that has to do with the fact that something was taken from him. It's actually more self-interested than it is love.
It is. But it has a lot to do. It has something to do with manhood and ego too, because he knows that they were sleeping together. So. It has a lot to do with
which is selfish, and that has nothing to do with the woman.
It has nothing to do with the justice of Zoe. It has something to do with his manhood thing. I have to agree with that, and his lack thereof.
Oh no. Well, okay. Can I say something? I thought that they were actually going to.
Sorry,
Lucas. No, I thought they were going to actually go a little bit harder because when he got brought back into the jail and he was in the hallway and the guy spit blood on him.
Yeah,
such a kid.
I was like, that is beyond disgusting. But I thought when
like, can you wipe it off me?
No, but I thought that when basically they told them to put pressure on him when Doug told Carter to put pressure on him, I thought they were gonna beat him up. I thought they were gonna.
Well, they did. I don't know if you saw towards the end, his eyes were black when he was talking with
Janine.
Janine.
Yeah, I think
I
he
thought that was
did.
him because he's tired and he's stressed, not because he's beat up.
I took it as like he got in a fight.
Well, then can I say something? Then to me, he has way more manhood than we're all giving him credit. Because at the end of the day, I'm sorry, like based on his character, and he gets beat up in jail, and someone spits blood in his face, and he's still talking about not taking a plea.
Well, maybe, but
I would literally be like, can I have protective custody? Whatever you want me to sign, I'm going to sign. You need to put me, you know what I mean? You need to put me in like Orange is the New Black jail, even though that jail is kind of hardcore too. But you get what I'm trying to say? Like, I need to be in jail with like embezzlers and people who do tax fraud, not obviously like murderers.
Well, here's the thing.
But they can't get him on murder, which is what they were trying to imply, that he tried killing Zoe and he was obsessed with it. So he knows that
they mentioned it, but they squashed that. They went for straight cyber-terrorism.
But they had to throw it out there to show what they're capable of doing or where they're capable of going. But also, when the guy spit the blood on his face, I took it as, okay, you want to get in, you want to fight, but you're scared to get blood on your hands. Like, if you're in it to go against Frank and you can't even have blood on your face, like, you can't do this game. Like, you're done.
Yeah.
That's it. You're screaming, please wipe this off my face.
So it's like if you're gonna be prepared, if you want to do, if you want to fight, then you have to be prepared to go all the way. And it's usually the guy who's prepared to die that usually wins, because the other guy's like, it's cool, we don't have to go that far. Yeah. And he's not willing to, if he's not willing to go all the way. I mean, at the same time, it seems like he's willing to go all the way, but then he's not getting any support either. Hammersmith is there supporting him as a friend and doing these favors for him as a friend, but it's more of like, okay, I'll do this for you as a friend because I've respected you, Lucas. You're a good journalist.
Well, we haven't really seen him get to the point where it's really tough
he's still
for him
skeptical.
to handle.
But he's skeptical.
Because he doesn't know what he's facing.
You see, that's the part of me that looks at him like he's an idiot. Because if he doesn't know what he's facing, how could you not know what you're facing? This guy is the vice president of the United States who didn't get voted in. What kind of influence do you think this guy does not have, who manipulated himself to become the vice president of the United States?
And I think it's exactly what you mentioned a little bit earlier, is I think that's the big difference between Janine and Lucas. I think that Janine is arguably, of the two of them, is the more intelligent one, because she's actually thinking steps ahead.
Right.
So that's even when he goes, oh, you saved yourself. She's like, no, I was trying to save both of us.
Right.
Like, and even when he then asked the question, like, he's going to get away with it, she was like, yes. Like, she's not saying I don't agree with you. And also, she also specified, but you did commit a crime. So regardless of whether you thought it was in the better good, the greater good, you actually did break into a server. You stole the Herald's two-word passcode or whatever the case may be. But she literally was like, okay, so let's make the next move. So you do the article. Everyone's going to think you're a crazy lunatic because they're going to release these pictures. They're going to say you were obsessed with Zoe. They're going to actually say that you were sleeping with Zoe when she worked at the Herald. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Which is probably against the rules, if not, an abuse of power and so forth and so on.
Right.
Let alone they're going to plan all this stuff on you because they can. And how are you going to explain the fact of, like, how did you find this hacker guy? How did you know how to, what was it called? The internet that we're not aware of? Whatever, like, the sub-internet is. I don't remember what it's called, but the internet that he basically, like, was actually on to find the hacker.
Right.
Like, that's not what a normal, ordinary person does.
That's
so
true.
as he's explaining it, right, it's the whole concept of when you're not crazy and you're trying to explain to people how you're not crazy, you sound crazy. Right? So he's going to be like, oh, no, it just so happened that one of my reporters happened to be writing a story on blah, 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 and then I happened to find this hacker, and then I stole this guy's phone to get the ID, and then I contacted the hacker with his passcode from the Herald, and then I met him with his chinchilla, and blah, 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 named whatever his chinchilla's name is. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, that sounds cuckoo.
It sounds cuckoo.
Do you know what I mean? And it's the truth.
Crazy. That is crazy. You're right. It doesn't sound.
Do you know what I mean? And he slapped me, and I didn't have a problem with it. And he offered me wine, and he lives in this fabulous apartment, and he has all of these monitors,
and screens all over the place.
Oh, and he was the one telling me what to do, so I had nothing to do with it.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
so they're like sex fetish, chinchilla.
Right. And again, it would be, and again, given the nature of his position, he's highly intelligent. So someone looking at it would be like, oh, you're really that stupid? You can't argue that you're that stupid.
I call people like that book smart, street stupid. They don't have, they have all the education as far as what they've studied, but they haven't, gotten
practical application.
But being on the streets is completely different. People don't use the same logic.
Yeah, they really don't.
I'd have been with Janine. Well, actually, I would have been way further away.
I mean, Janine was like, I'm going to retire, basically, and I'm going to go take care of my mom. My mom needs me. This is the perfect opportunity for me to go take care of her mom, and that's what she did. So she went to stay with her.
Yeah, and I need Carter to fall in a hole.
What's
the
that?
FBI guy. I need him to fall in a hole.
Yeah, he's a little interesting, this guy.
I don't even need to go into in detail, but I need him to fall in a hole.
He's an interesting dude.
He reminds me, and it's not a coincidence that him and Doug are friends, because Doug is beyond not realizing what he wants.
Doug is turned into like a robot. Like he's like, It's like, I can't live like this. Yes, you can. You can live like this. It's like
Teletubbies.
Right. It's like really weird. It's like I'm in the middle of nowhere. No one's gonna find me here. You made it here, didn't you? Like
that
everything
was
is like
so rude.
It was like you're here,
can
aren't
I say
you?
something? It's so funny. Actually, that was the only part I didn't think was rude.
Well,
That's the only part when he said, well,
that was
you're
like
here,
common
aren't you?
sense.
Because exactly.
No,
because,
but I'm saying it was rude because they put her there.
No. But she meant it in so much as like basically like church, right? And at the end of the day, he's like, but you used to be a prostitute. You're here. And ironically, like that's the whole nature of church.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's that you're going to save your soul, whether or not you lost your soul or not. But it actually is the place for like prostitutes and other people where she may have interacted in her life. And that's what he's saying. You could totally run into someone. I think that to jump on your point, Emma, is the fact that he put her in this situation. And that part of toying with her, I don't understand, because he could have just as easily put her in Connecticut and still had access to her and not necessarily put her in Baltimore.
Right.
Like, Baltimore is 45 minutes outside of D.C.
Right.
Dude, that's your fault. And do you really expect her to actually stay at home? And if so, then you need to tell her. Like, you need to, the minute you brought her to the new place, right, you need to say, these are the rules. And if those are the rules, then why isn't she working from home? No, seriously, because then really have her on lockdown. Then she needs to be telemarketing from home. She can't leave her home. You send her everything via FedEx. No, including her food. Like, you can't literally expect her to actually go out in the normal world. And what are we assuming she is? 21, 22?
Yeah,
maybe?
she's young. Yeah.
21, 22. So we really think that she's going to go out in the normal world and not to speak to anyone ever?
Right.
And no one's going to try to speak to her? And she's not going to yearn for some human interaction? Because ironically, Doug, even though he's a weirdo, he obviously craves human interaction, and ironically, he gets it, even if it's with Frank.
Right.
And obviously, he does or doesn't want it with Rachel.
Well,
no, he does
I think he does want it with
like
Rachel.
Obsessed with her.
Flip.
Yeah, he's obsessed with her.
I like this episode, and I like how they have been building on women power and trying to. I really think the women in the show are going to be much more powerful than the men, in the way Rachel asserts her own sense of power on Doug, the way she controls him.
One thing I know is when a man wants me.
She handled him, and he was just like he was in the moment, and then he realized, oh crap, what am I doing? Back off! We can't be doing this. And then she went just like in another mode of, oh, okay, well, you want dinner?
No, but before that, and because I'm actually curious about this, but before that, she goes, I learned in church who Rachel was.
That's what I was gonna bring that up.
And do you remember exactly what she said? She basically was like, she was a really beautiful girl. She was, I don't remember what her job was, but let's say she was like getting water at the stream.
She was talking about how Jacob worked and toiled for her hand in marriage for 7 years, and they finally got married, and then they had Joseph, who later became a king. And I was like, what is the meaning of her telling this story? If anybody knows, please tell us what you think this means.
Might be, I took it as in her going to church, she's trying to clean and cleanse herself, but also maybe, that, I don't know if it meant towards him, but I think she was trying to imply someone new that she's going to meet. And even though her past has kind of taken over her life, that 7 years is going to be like her past, and all the things she's done, being a prostitute and everything, is, even though it's stretched it out, she's going to find someone who she's going to marry.
Okay, now that's interesting, because the only kind of thing that I took from it is because if you notice how Doug looked on his face when she said the story, he turned around and he looked, it was very like, what the hell does that mean, kind of, sort of. But it definitely sent a message to him. To me, I kind of took it as the only thing I can kind of interpret it from her telling the story is, if you want this, I deserve better. That's how I took it. Because Jacob worked for her hand for 7 years, and she produced a king. It's like, I'm capable and I'm better than this. And if you have place this much value on me, besides this life over here and you really want me? Because obviously he has an emotional connection to her that is beyond just wanting to help her to protect Frank. He's like in love with her, and it's obvious. Just like she said, if there's anything I know is when a man wants me, she knows that he wants her beyond sex because he's already had sex with her. He's already slept with her, like as a prostitute. If he just wants sex, he would just have sex with her and bounce. He wants her. So he's like into her. So I think basically she's saying, if you want me as me, you want me, not sex, but you want me, then I'm valuable enough for you to work for me in the way that a man who really wants a woman would work for her. And you might get a king out of it.
I think it's a great analysis.
Well,
I think that's great analysis.
But the fact that she even told that story and the way she told it was like, this girl, I got love for her. And my prediction into season 3 is this girl's going to come back to bite Frank in the ass in this whole scenario. Her and Hammerschmidt are going to be...
Well, that's what I'm saying. I feel like the females are...
The other reporter, too.
Oh, the new one.
The new one, yeah.
Her new
I don't know about her yet.
Oh, yeah.
No,
but she's told... No, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. But Rachel... They're trying to set this new journalist up as being someone.
I don't know what's going to happen later on, but I'm predicting that,
Wait, we're now doing predictions? Go ahead. I'm just joking. I'm being flipped. Sorry. I'm being flipped. Sorry.
No, I know this is, I'm a little early for it, but I think Claire is going to form her own team. I don't know why, but I feel like all the, women and all the ones that we haven't really thought of are going to be her allies because she's really... It's all about Claire now.
Well, let's talk about
not
Claire.
all about Claire, but she is taking a lot of fame away from Frank, and the way she handles her own business.
Well, go ahead.
No, you go. I actually think that it's the opposite in a weird way. I think that her strength comes from the fact that she's lined back up with Frank. So season 1, I felt there was a disconnect. And the disconnect was because he didn't become Secretary of State and she lost the funds and so forth and so on, the CWI was in jeopardy. So she was actually thinking about the CWI and not necessarily about the end goal, which was Frank's succession or ascension, right? I think the minute they got back in line with one another and started communicating like they do, and they started to be a team, that's, I think, when Claire gained her power. Not necessarily that it's only connected to Frank, but once she focused and realized what her end goal was, that's why I think she's asserting power, because everything we see her doing is in complete alignment with their master plan. I think season 1 is that their plan hadn't fully been formed, because on some levels, she not necessarily didn't trust him, but he dropped the ball.
Right.
So she didn't feel like she was dealing with an equal. That's why she kind of kept punching him a little bit, like, stand up. He stood up now, even figuratively and literally in the way that they're running together, and now she keeps up with him and so forth and so on.
And
she now respects him in the totality of who he is as a...
Who he was supposed to be.
Exactly. Which is my exact, point is Frank, who better to face Frank than Claire? There's no one an opponent he would go up against that he even has any respect for or that can stand up to him.
But I think the difference is, and we might have to, kind of carry this on next episode, I think the difference is, why would Claire ever go against Frank?
Well, that was just a prediction.
Do you know what I mean? I think it's a great prediction, but I think the difference is, because I think that would be...
I mean,
would be against her core.
Right, I don't see that happening either.
She's extremely loyal... dedicated person, ironically.
But there's a couple things I want to add before or present before we wrap up here in a second. Is that Claire, her fangs have started to show a little bit more with the master plan, and how she made a little inference to the first lady about Christina being close to the president. I was like, oh, here we go. That's the inference is obvious. Like, she's spending time with the president a lot. Yeah, I don't really like her. I'm not into women who sleep with their bosses because of the whole Peter Russo thing, right? But we all know that Claire don't give a shit about her hanging out with Russo. Excuse my French. We know that Claire doesn't care about that. It doesn't matter to her. But she's just using that as something that's actually factual to her as a weapon to use and just plant that seed. All she's doing is planting that seed that's going to foster it and water it. And then what she does is she goes back to Christina and says, yeah, I think you should reassure your loyalty to the president.
Didn't Christina look like a little kid outside of the principal's office?
Yes. Yes.
They're the way that they frame the scene and they set things up. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
it's
just
brilliant.
her facial expressions.
Yeah.
And we can talk about this next episode because we get a little more meat as far as this particular situation. But Remy hooking up with Jackie Sharp.
Yeah. I say we talk about it at the top of the next episode and really delve into it.
Yeah, delve into it next episode because we get a little more meat next episode as far as what goes on and how that formulates. And the one question that I'm going to present before this episode wraps up is when Frank was about to throw out that first pitch and all the power went out. Who thought of the Super Bowl last year?
Oh, okay.
Remember there was a power outage?
No.
You don't remember?
Yeah, no.
Okay, the Super Bowl, Ravens versus 49ers.
Yeah.
There was a power outage.
Kills the momentum.
The power outage. So I'm thinking like, is this kind of what happened? Is there something going on in government? How could there be a power outage at the Super Bowl? The Super Bowl?
For how long was it?
It was a long time.
Yeah. Wow.
It was a long time. It was really a long time.
That's a great question, Thaddeus.
Yeah, I'm like, what is going on? So I know some of you guys might have thought about that. So, make some comments on iTunes or YouTube. Go on Twitter. You guys can follow. Where can we find you guys?
You can find me on Twitter at Sofia Stanley.
You guys can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Real McKay, and also GQJedi.com.
And you can find me on GQJedi.com and Club Thaddeus at Twitter and Instagram. And you guys can leave comments and just present your theories as well. Until next episode, ladies and gentlemen.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.
Thank you for watching AfterBuzz TV on YouTube. For more of your favorite after shows and interviews, subscribe to our channel here, and be sure to share your opinion on the episode in the comment section below here. We'd love to see what you guys are buzzing about. Thanks again. Buzz you later.